till this day, I'm one of few, if not probably the only person in both sides of my family to go to college and be able to graduate with a bachelor's degree. My biggest feel good moment is realizing that I created the spaces that I needed when I first came to Chico. I have noticed that if they speak in slang, they don't get listened to as often. People just kind of write them off.
Hola, and welcome back to the Latina Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Diaz, and today's episode, we're talking with Lucia Mercado, who moved to Chico for school and ended up building community from the ground up. She's a community relations specialist, the founder of Mercado Productions, and the creator of Lunar Market and Divine Sundays Festival. We talk about growing where you're planted, starting a business when you feel alone, and why community is everything. So let's head to the conversation.
Hi, very happy to be here. Like you said, my name is Lucia Mercado. I am born and raised in Riverside, California, and now am residing and building community in Chico, California. I run Mercado Productions, which is a up and coming productions company where we do large scale events like pop up markets and festivals.
I love that. And you know, when you sent us your request like to be part of the podcast, you mentioned that you moved to Chico in 2017 for school and now you're building community there, as you mentioned. So what was the transition like and how did you start to find your footing? Because I can imagine that's a big transition.
Yeah, totally. I mean, till this day, I'm one of few, if not probably the only person in both sides of my family to go to college and be able to graduate with a bachelor's degree. So when I came to Chico, it was really hard in the beginning to even know, first of all, where to go. I had to navigate financial aid and a lot of those steps by myself. So one of the biggest deciding factors was, can I afford this on my own? And so Chico State luckily was one of the two schools. It was either here or Sonoma State that I knew that with some loans and working full time, I could pay off college by myself. And I'm really glad I did. I think that once I came and toured Chico, I really fell in love with the campus. The architecture is really beautiful. So that's why I chose it initially. And then as time went on, I was able to really get in with wonderful organizations. You know, when I first started going to Chico State, I stayed at the dorms and they had a really cool program where the whole floor that I was living in was all business majors. Yeah, and that was so helpful because I remember I used to not be very, like, vocal at that time. You know, I've always been a social butterfly, but I feel like it takes me a little bit of time to warm up and acclimate, and when I first moved to Chico, I was, really new to the area. I remember literally me and my stepmom still talk about it. When they moved me into my dorms, I was one of the very last people to get here because my moms needed to both be out of work and off of work to be able to drive me up to Chico. We're a 9-hour drive from Merced, California, so when I arrived, I was in, leggings and a poncho, and am walking into the dorms with all my stuff, and all the girls are in, like, short shorts and crop tops and Vans, and I remember my stepmom making a joke of like, "Oh, there's obviously a uniform and you didn't get the memo," and I felt like I just stood out like a sore thumb. It was really funny, and now when I look back at it, I'm like, I mean, there's no problem with that. Like, that was awesome and showed very early on that I was gonna, like, be one of the drops in the water to add, like, a ripple effect to what Chico could look like in the future. But definitely when I moved to Chico, I stuck out a lot, and I think that even in the spaces that I took up, room, I it was very obvious to me and very quickly obvious to me that I was gonna be one of the few Hispanic people in those spaces.
Yeah, and I wonder, like, because I'm reminiscing too myself of like my college experience, but I see here at University of Houston, it was super diverse. So this school was
Yeah.
like filled with with Hispanic people. But I can just imagine, like, did you like I can imagine those type of spaces where you don't see as many of us in there. Like, was there ever like a doubt or if like you felt a need to conform, or is it like you're like, no, I'm gonna be myself. I'm not gonna conform to any expectations or
Yeah.
unset expectations that are being
No,
put.
100%. I think especially when I meet people from SoCal, we have a certain, like, I don't think it's, like, dialect is the right word, but a certain lingo, the way that we speak. I think that, like, a lot of the times growing up, they call it, like, hot Cheeto girl or, like, chunti, like, speech, but that's how we talk. Like, that's exactly how we speak to each other. There's certain ways that we in Southern California speak versus Northern California, and then I was also my bachelor's my undergrad was in accounting specifically, but even in business admin, you see a lot of white males in that, and that they're like the dominant group within these spaces. So I think, especially being a Latina, being brown just in general in these spaces, I definitely stuck out. And I do recall for a certain amount of time having to change the way that I spoke, especially, even growing up in Chico, or for me, like I grew up professionally in Chico. And so a lot of the times it was having to sit in a room and listen to how people spoke and how they communicated, and trying to, conform to that and trying to pick up on the way that they speak, because I noticed that when I meet other people who are in similar spaces, I have noticed that if they speak in slang, they don't get listened to as often. People just kind of write them off.
Yeah, no, and just it can be sometimes such a jarring experience because now you're having to adapt and you're having to adjust to what the what the locals are used to. But I can imagine. So you mentioned you graduated with a degree in accounting, and I so noticed that that was during the pandemic too. So you started a jewelry business that eventually led you to event hosting and community building. So how
Mhm.
how was that transition like?
Yeah, I it kind of happened. It wasn't intentional, I guess. So when I was towards the end of getting my degree, I was interning at a CPA firm in San Francisco, and I was super excited right before everything shut down for COVID. The plan was that I would actually take up an internship over the summer in San Fran. So I was looking for apartments, I was looking for like temporary housing, and then the shutdown happened and they were like, "Okay, we're actually just going to mail you all the supplies, you're going to work from home." And that was the biggest blessing, because I ended up working from home for a few months. They offered me a full-time job pending graduation, and then I ended up doing a second round of internship after I got that opportunity, and they unfortunately during that let me go. And essentially it was just that I wasn't keeping up. The
Yeah.
when they let me go, they said, "We want to give you enough time to find a new position at another CPA firm. The work that you're doing is good, but it's just not fast enough." And that was one of my first like instincts that, okay, maybe this is not what I should be doing,
Yeah.
because I've always been a slower learner. I'm dyslexic, so that's like
Mhm.
one of the big things that I tend to mix numbers around. I tend to
Yeah.
mix my letters around when I'm doing certain work. And also, I was feeling so lonely during that time. Like, not only was it pandemic time, but a lot of the time with CPA work and accounting work, you're having to do a certain part of a project by yourself, and you're trying to get it done as quickly as possible to move on to the next step. So a lot of it, like, you're working alone. And then on top of that, for me, I think it was recognizing that corporate world is very competitive. You are trying to be on top of, yeah, you have peers, but you're trying to be the best of your peers so that you move up first, and then the person that is your boss can move up too. And for me, it was like there was not any teamwork within that sort of structure, and that was really jarring as well, that it made me realize just how unhappy I would be in that long term. So it really was a blessing in disguise. I ended up working at a position locally. I was just doing bookkeeping, and at the time I was again just feeling really lonely. Like, I had coworkers and I would see them, but I started going to like little pop-up markets. It was COVID time, so a lot of the stores and restaurants were closed, but there were these like little indie pop-up markets that started coming out in Chico, where if you wore a mask, you could go and you could shop from local vendors. And I was really obsessed with like just buying jewelry at the time. And I remember having told a friend, I want to learn how to do wire wrapping at home and make my own jewelry just for fun. And at the time, he had just started his business and he was doing these pop-up markets. So he's like, "If you can make even 5 necklaces by next month, Imma be at this market. Let me know and I can like save you a space in my booth. And you can just put out your necklaces and see what happens." And yeah, it was amazing. I feel like it just kind of snowballed into this whole business, and within a year I was thinking to myself, maybe I could host a market and maybe I could get into that realm. And 2022 was technically when I hosted my first market, and then yeah, since then it's really just grown into, now I host about 15 events a year.
Wow, and honestly, like, I'm hearing you explain everything, and I'm here like, props to you because, like, you're dyslexic and you did accounting. Like, I
Mm,
sucked at accounting when I took it in college.
it's hard.
Yeah, no, and so really props to you, even that, that pathway didn't like, didn't work out. Is I feel like it's still like, getting those experience kind of help you on the long run too. Like, hey, this might not be for me, but I am slowly figuring out what I want to do. Like I feel like we can't be we can't be scared that one pathway doesn't work. There's different paths that we can also take, but everything's a learning experience.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it was just, like, being able to I was sad, of course. I literally
Yeah.
remember vividly the day that they let me go from that position, and that was my whole world. I was so sure that I would be the first millionaire in my family, and that was my only goal. Like, I had a one-track mind, and it was to be rich. And it's so funny now because I'm doing the complete opposite of what I thought I would be doing at this point in my life. Um but I remember when they let me go, I was actually in the middle of getting my hair done, and so I, like, ran to the car to take the call, and I had bleach in my hair, and it was a
Oh my
hot summer day, so I was like, "I know this is processing even faster right now that I'm in the car." So I cried for literally a minute, and I was like, "Okay, get back inside and move on with life, you're gonna figure it out." And yeah, like, it really just once I opened and I feel like every time that I've opened my mind to not being so focused on one path and just allowing, like, whatever path to lead me and going with the flow and trying to accept every moment as an opportunity, I feel like doors open.
Yeah, no, and also your friend he's like, "Hey, you do 5 necklaces? Like, I'll have a little
Yeah.
space in my booth for you." And I love that kinda like, he put you out there and that kinda made you like, "Hey, maybe I can do
Maybe
this."
I can do this, totally. I would have
Yeah.
never expected to do something like that if it weren't for him just mentioning it, and I literally, like, till this day, props to him for even having that foresight to see that in me and support me in that way.
And, like, I can imagine so now you do 50 markets, so how is it, like, handling all of that? Because I can imagine it could be, like, pretty chaotic.
Yeah, so when I first I guess one of the biggest things is, like, when I was working at I was doing bookkeeping locally and I was running, you know I was starting to run my markets on the side. They were still very small. I had maybe, like, 20 to 30 vendors, and even then that was pushing it. We would get handful of attendees, maybe like 200 people would come through a market at a time. And again, it was just someone took a chance on me. So there was a guy that would come to the markets a lot. And one day he's like, "Hey, I actually work for downtown Chico and I do the events for downtown Chico. I need an assistant. What do you think?" And at the time, I was working full time doing bookkeeping. I wasn't making as much as a CPA, but again, I was still making enough money where I was comfortable. And
Yeah.
so I feel like it was again one of those opportunities where it's like, am I going to go work for a nonprofit and make much less and work less hours?
Yeah.
And I think after thinking about it for some time, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do it. Like I'm gonna make
Yeah.
the jump. I'm gonna see how this works out for me. And maybe it doesn't. And maybe I have to end up looking for another bookkeeping job to be able to pay the bills. But I'm young. I think I could make rent at least, and that's enough for me. And within, I wanna say it was 6 months of being in that job, I ended up being promoted to the manager of events for downtown Chico. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so that really opened my eyes to so much, oh my gosh, like, I it's funny because I think that a lot of my life has been other people seeing the potential in me that I hadn't seen yet, and again, I think that just comes from not having the background. I didn't have a lot of people in my family that my family has always worked for someone else, and even though I'm still working full time now and working for someone else, I just haven't had a lot of people that have shown me what it's like to run your own business and to be your own boss and to make these leaps of faith. So for me, I was always just too scared to even dream that big. Um, and I feel that when he had offered me the job as his assistant, he had in mind that I was gonna run events. And that was before I even had any indication that that was something that someone else would see in me. So yeah, I went from essentially being someone's assistant to then running the Thursday night market, which for people who are part of the area or even in Butte County, they know the Thursday night market is huge. So we run for or they run for 25 consecutive weeks during the summer. So starts in April, goes all the way through to the end of September, and it's a weekly market. Every Thursday night, they shut down a street and they have more than 100 vendors out there from farmers to like artisanal goods to food trucks. So you're literally having to work with so many different departments. It was like all at once by myself. I had to figure out how do I get permits for farmers markets, and how do I make sure that we're in within, these rules that they're giving us? How do I make sure that we are working with the B County Health Department and making sure that all of our food trucks are up to code? How do I make sure that everyone that I'm processing is processed in a way where we're covering our butts and making sure that we're, following whatever path we have forward, but also communicating to them appropriately how things should go. And so yeah, it was tough. Like the first year was so hard. I wouldn't really sleep. I was working like 12-hour days most days. And at the time I was very lucky because I brought on someone who they were friendly with me, but they weren't necessarily my friend yet. And she's actually grown to be my best friend now. And she has we left downtown Chico, DCBA together and now still work together through Mercado Productions. And she's like my right hand woman. She's amazing. Another Latina who actually used to host markets here in town as well. And my very first market that I ever did was her market. So very full circle moment. And I feel like I got like full throttle into that space. So now I host 15 a year. I do 3 big festivals and then I do maybe 10, no, I do maybe like 15 pop-up markets outside of that on my own.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel as heavy because I have the experience of doing over 50 events in a year through downtown Chico.
Yeah, and just like I'm just imagining that first year, like, and it's was it around 50 events or was it a little less or around the same
Yeah, it
amount?
was 50. It was 50. Like, if
Oh
you
my god.
counted every single market as its own market, and then on top of that, we would do, seasonal events like Friday night concerts. They do, like, big events like the Taste of Downtown, and like, Downtown Chico has so many events, and so, essentially, it was me having to run them all, and then you're still running, like, a consistent market on top of it, so, yeah, it was a beast.
I'm wondering, like, this is just a question out there, and it might be out there, but like, were you involved in like the selection of vendors, or how would that process work out?
Yeah, to a certain extent. So because Downtown Chico is a nonprofit that is working for the businesses in the area, it would be there was a committee that went behind it. So
Mm.
usually it was like I would make the first selection and just off of knowing we can't have any competing vendors. So let's say we have already 3 Mexican restaurants in downtown Chico, we couldn't bring any more taco trucks in because
Mm.
it directly conflicts and directly competes with the businesses that are essentially paying the bills for our organization. So there was a lot of things like that, but then there were times where there were certain vendors that I didn't know if it were a yes or a no, and then that would go to a committee that was made up of board of directors. Yeah, so it's also that it was like opening me up to a whole different avenue. Like again, I was like so gung ho, like I'm gonna go CPA route, I'm gonna be corporate, and then now I'm working in a nonprofit and having to understand not just like events because that was its own thing, having to figure out how to run all these events properly and make sure that I'm up to code on everything. But on top of that, I'm also working within a nonprofit that can be pretty political,
Yeah.
because at the end of
Yeah.
the day, whether you like it or not, when you're working for a district, you are working also with city council and you're working within, you know, and communicating with city officials. So I think that that was a big part of it too, is how I grew myself and professional development in being able to communicate properly and
Mhm.
be confident communicating with all these officials.
Yeah, no, I can imagine communications like guys, it really is key, especially when you're working nonprofit. It really is key because there's like so many layers to everything.
Mhm.
But yeah, I can imagine. And in your submission, you mentioned something I really like. You have to claim what's yours or deny your energy to those who won't value your work ethic. And can you tell us more about what that looks like in practice, or what you've seen in practice, or what you've done?
Yeah, yeah, I think that especially when I first started hosting events, there were a lot of spaces where I would essentially want a venue and want to work within a certain space, and I would go and pitch them an idea. And unfortunately, it did happen to me a couple times here in town where I would pitch an idea and they would either never get back to me or just say like, "Oh, I don't have capacity for that now, but let me get back to you in a few months." And then weeks later, I would hear from people within the community that they were approached to do that event. The event that I pitched, the event that I came up with, and then a white person usually would be approached to host the event within that space. And unfortunately, that's kind of been something that repeats itself for me and around me. And so I think a lot of it has been to be to set boundaries within that. Like I've had
Yeah.
to unfortunately be put in these positions to then learn how to say, if you're going to host an event that's similar, these are the boundaries on where we're not going to cross over, and how. And I think a lot of it is also just saying it out loud. I think a lot of people get surprised by that when I do try to protect what's mine and say, we can all eat at this table, but we also can't be grabbing from each other's plates because
Yeah.
that's not fair.
Yeah, no, and is he having to stand your ground? And and I can imagine like has it have as a young Latina working these spaces, like have you felt like overlooked or like how do you handle
Oh,
that type of
yeah, a
situation?
lot. I mean, I think even, working with certain positions, I'll be at a position for years and I'll never be promoted into these roles that I felt that I was qualified for and did all the work for. And then within a year of leaving, someone new to the position was promoted into that role. So, yeah, and that's happened to me. And I think for me, again, I just take it as like that wasn't my door to open, and it is what it is, and move forward. But learning every time to speak up for myself. I'm very lucky now. I work for Exberby County, so it's a tourism organization. I think that it's much more in line with what I'm hoping to do in the future. And my boss is now a woman. She is very not just very encouraging to me, but also pushes me into things that I'm still uncomfortable with. Like
Yeah.
recently, we had the conversation. I haven't even been there a year, but in May, I hit a year. And one of the things that she said to me is, by the way, when your year comes up, you have to ask me for a raise, or you have to come and negotiate what that looks like, because women aren't taught enough how to negotiate and how to speak up for themselves. So I fully expect you to put a meeting on my calendar, and you need to like lead this meeting. And that's kinda nerve-wracking, like, I haven't. I'm very. I think especially as a Hispanic woman of any, like on top above of anything, I think Hispanics in general were taught to take what we can, and like you get what you get and you don't throw fit. I feel like that's always kind of been the feeling. Or you work as hard as you can just to keep the job. And I'm like, no, actually, I think what I've learned more than anything being an adult is that if you accept whatever you accept, people are going to continue to give you. So unless you speak up, you're never gonna get better than the person next to you. And you'll meet people who are less qualified that will get further in life just simply because they speak up for themselves.
No, and I love that you brought that up too, because that's like such a such a topic. But as especially especially as women, sometimes we're told like, oh, like just keep what you're given, and then it's harder for us to even like see our self worth too, or like
Yeah.
put a price to what our work
Oh my
is,
god, that's
because
like the hardest part of it,
yeah, like
is actually charging what you deserve or what you're qualified for.
yeah, because we're told like, "Oh, we gotta work super hard and then the promotion will come." But no, we have to put like, "Hey, I've done this, this, and this
Yeah,
already. Hey, like I'm putting in the work. Are you not gonna put like more value to what I'm doing?" And it's such a hard conversation to have. But I do think, as Latinas, guys, we gotta ask for that raise. Like it's been a while. Hey, put yourself out there. Speak
yeah.
up. And but
Mhm.
it's so hard. I can imagine. Like you're just like, I'm just really in here in the job, but I'm glad she's there and she's motivating you to put yourself out there, so I
Yeah,
really love that.
absolutely. I definitely am very happy in the space that I'm in, and I think again that's exactly why I don't see any of my past jobs as bad experiences, because they all built me in certain ways and taught me certain things to get me to where I am. And at the end of the day, that was necessary to be here.
Yeah, no, and I wanna talk more about, like, you also run Mercado Productions and host, the Lunar Market and Divine Sundays festivals, and so what inspired you, to create these markets and, also start Mercado Productions, and what do you hope people feel when they show up?
Yeah, I feel like they've kind of snowballed into their own. It's like the events took on a life of their own, and for me, I literally see it as I just do the work to allow it to become what it's meant to.
Yeah,
I genuinely, first and foremost, believe that it is a community first and it's an event
yeah.
second. And
Oh,
the community is not my doing. The
yeah.
community is a doing of our vendors and our attendees and all the wonderful people that support and come out to these events. And we all collectively are the reason why they're successful and why they're still here,
Mhm.
and why people fall in love with the spaces. Because coming from an upbringing where I had a single mom for most of my life, my dad he's 4 years sober, but when I was younger, he wasn't in our life for a long time, unfortunately, because of addiction. So we grew up with just the mentality that we're not ever able to go to events, we're not ever able to go to many outings. It was too expensive for the most part to even like stop by Starbucks, you know? Like when I think about it now, I buy a coffee or a drink most days, and that would have been a luxury growing up. So
Yeah.
one of the biggest parts of when I started the events was how do I build spaces where it's not going to cost people to attend, and whether you're shopping, and that's wonderful. We want to make sure that our small businesses are making money and are able to at least pay their booth fees because they're the ones that are in a way allowing us to host these events. But also, how do we make it so that families can come out to this and don't feel like they're breaking bank to be able to partake in community and to be able to be in it. So really making them into third spaces has been one of the most fulfilling parts of this. Um when I first started, it really was just okay, we're in COVID. There's no other markets. There was at the time Flume Street Market is the market that I was attending mostly, and it was a weekly event, but outside of that there was nothing going on. So initially, Divine Sundays wasn't Divine Sundays festivals. It was meant to be a holistic, kind of witchy, but not really witchy, like more spiritual leaning. And after some time, we started like moving into I was doing monthly markets at first, and it was like a new theme every month because I love themes. I love hosting. So I was like, "Oh, we're going to do a circus theme." And then we did a pet party where like everyone brings their pets, and literally people brought out like dogs and cats obviously, but then like some people brought out lizards and snakes, and it was so cool, very cute. Um and so after doing a few themes, I kind of thought to myself, okay, I'm actually overworking myself by doing a monthly market. So I need to start doing quarterly. And what themes have I done already that really stood out? And so the ones that kind of stood out were the Spring Fae Festival, which till this day we still host, the Happy Hippie Summer Festival, and then our big one is the Chico Day of the Dead Festival. And then Lunar Market was more so actually before Divine Sunday started, Lunar Market was a concept that I thought of. So I wanted to do a market around the full moon and just host every single full moon. And funny enough, someone in town actually ended up hosting it first.
Oh,
So,
wonderful.
yeah, so when she started putting out her name is Natalia, when she started putting out her, promotion for it, I messaged her immediately and I was like, "Hey, super funny. I actually was thinking of starting this concept too. Can I help you? Like, is there any way like I will volunteer my time? I would love to be a vendor at this event, but I also would love to help bring this to life." And so she ended up doing the first one by herself, and by the second one, I came on board and started helping her coordinate it. We did it maybe 3 times before it got too cold because we were doing it at night only on full moon, so it was yeah, it was pretty hard to, and then we took almost a 6-month break before I came back to her, and we had met in between in those 6 months to, like, plan, and we would sit down and come up with some ideas, and it would never go anywhere. So eventually I came back to her and I said, "Hey, I would really love for this to continue. I would like to start one that is similar, but I don't wanna step on your toes. So if you are uncomfortable with it, let me know and I won't move forward." And that was, something that for me it was just, like, out of respect because you came up with it first. Like, this is your doing, I'm not gonna take credit for something if that makes you uncomfortable. And she was so cool. She ended up literally like giving me the password and everything, and she's like, "It's yours." Yeah, so Miss Natalie on Instagram, she's awesome. She's a really talented artist and musician, and for her, I feel more than anything, she started it because she also wanted it to be a third space. She had live music and the vendors, and it was attached to a coffee shop. So she really wanted it to give that vibe of just like something fun to do on a weeknight. And since taking over, again, it's just kind of blown up into its own thing. So now we host, we try not to host in rainy months because it just gets really hard. So we don't host like December, January, June, July, um, unless we can find indoor venues. But yeah, it's gotten to the point where I'm hosting at least once a month, and when I can, I'm hosting twice a month now. We're working with Chico State and doing pop-up markets on campus, which has been my biggest dream come true. Yeah, it's been awesome.
No, I'm so happy for y'all, especially I love, like, that she was like, "Hey," like, I like it became, like, collaborative, like, y'all had the same vision for it, and just wanted to make it a third space. So I love that that came together, and I like what she's like.
Yeah, and I've been so lucky to have people like her in my life that are just very giving and very willing to, like, essentially support the cause, just, like, give and see where it goes.
Yeah, and also I noticed you also do a bit of graphic design. So tell me about that.
Yeah, I think that kind of came, I guess, out of necessity. When I worked for Downtown Chico, because it's a nonprofit, there was not a big budget to do anything, and after some time I realized, like, well, I don't have any formal training, so I literally just use Canva. Canva has been a godsend, and I think for a lot of us who host events, it's been a really great way to be able to host events on a budget. With Downtown Chico and doing their graphics, that was really helpful because then I was able to essentially say, okay, I'm not only hosting the events, but I'm also, like, running the social media for a time, and I was also doing the graphic designs. And then that bled into Mercado Productions, where
Mhm.
to be able to keep costs low for vendors, to be able to keep events free for attendees, I would just do a lot of the work by myself. So, like, all the admin is still to this day done by me. Now I'm very lucky to be able to make money through the events because we do bring in some sponsorships and we've grown the events to the point where we have a little bit of a budget. So I pay graphic designers, I pay almost every single event is the posters and signage are designed by a different local artist, which has been,
The
like, my
best.
favorite part. But for a long time, I was designing it on Canva, and it was just, making do with what I had. So, I feel like through that process, I've gotten okay. I think a lot of the, designs that I do can, like, either be very whimsy or, like, very clean depending on what I need them to be. But, yeah, definitely just something that was self-taught, and I figured it out as I went.
Also, is there anything that I haven't mentioned that you wanna talk about?
Yeah, I guess it's just, like, for me, the biggest part of I guess the biggest message that I would love to share out of running my own events is really trying your best not to pay attention to the progression of someone else's life. I have wonderful friends actually in Sacramento. Their names are Lalo and Leandra. They are so talented. They're younger than me. They host Sacktown's Finest Market and actually just started running a coffee shop called Sun House Cafe. And for a while, like, it never came out of like jealousy or anything like that, but it definitely would there would be days where I would look at them and be like, how are they growing so quickly? And how are they finding success so fast? Where I am working my butt off. And there were days where we wouldn't have very many attendees to the event, and I would feel like the event was a failure. And so there were times where looking at someone else's progression really hurt me and really hindered my growth. And I think that ever since letting go of that and just being like, "You know what, universe? My time is gonna come when my time comes, and as long as I'm honest and I'm doing events in a way that I know I'm not cheating any vendors, I know that I'm doing my best and I'm working hard, my time will come," and it has. And I think that that has been one of my biggest lessons is not to look at someone else and think that it's going to go exactly like that because it's not. And the process of especially in entrepreneurial work, it's not linear. You could do all the same steps and it could be one little thing that makes it different. Sacramento is a much larger market than Chico. That could be a big part of why they found success very quickly. Yeah, there could be a number of reasons, but I think that that has been my biggest, I guess, like, learning lesson through this is just making sure that I trust myself, that I know I'm doing honest work, and that I'm giving it my all and pushing forward through the hard times.
No, and I think that's wonderful advice, especially for our listeners, because sometimes we're so distracted by what other people are doing that we're like, hey, no, like we gotta focus on me. I might not have that success yet that other people have, but I'm getting there. I'm gonna be on my path. I'm gonna focus and do what I need to do to get to that point. Who knows when, but I'm gonna be prepared and ready for when it comes.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's just my process. I think that in a way, I think universe, God, whatever you choose to call it, I think that it knew that I needed more time to prep and to lay my groundwork. For the first 2 to almost 3 years, I really wasn't making money. Like,
Yeah.
Lunar Market Divine Sundays under the umbrella of Mercado Productions was breaking even every single event, and I was lucky if I was making, like, $100 off of an event. So when you think about all the hours that went into those events and barely breaking even, I think a lot of people would have been discouraged. And I just saw it as a a very lucky opportunity for me because I had a full-time job and I was able to somehow manage both. So even though I was tired and I was not being compensated for it, my heart felt happy and my soul was really happy with the impact that I was making in my community. And I think now, years later, I've been doing it for almost 4 years, seeing that there are people that say, like, this is where I see the most Hispanic people or the where I see the most people of color. And I think that that has been my biggest accomplishment and my biggest feel good moment is realizing that I created the spaces that I needed when I first came to Chico.
That's so amazing. That warms my heart so much too, because like I can imagine like you like now seeing like, from when you first got there to where it is now and being just such a big part of that. Like props to you because like, oh my God, that's so amazing. Because we don't imagine ourselves when we get there. We don't imagine, oh, we're gonna make a big impact. And
No,
now
you really don't, and I think, like, a big part of it has also been, like, again, because I have friends in Sacramento, which is only an hour and a half away from Chico, multiple times they've been like, "Move to Sacramento, like, you could be doing so much," and don't get me wrong, I have visited and I see it, and sometimes I do get that feeling of, like, "Wow, like, life could look very different here," but I think for me, it was also d deciding to be essentially, like, plant like, how do people say, "Grow where you're planted," rather than trying to go somewhere else, and for me, I think it was recognizing that I would make a bigger impact in Chico than I would in Sacramento. I think in Sacramento, there's a lot of diversity already, there's a lot of people doing the work, and I could easily have been in Chico and been like, "Oh, Chico has nothing for me. Chico has no cultural events. Chico has no community for me." But instead, I did the work to create that community and went through the hardships of being uncomfortable in spaces where there weren't people that looked like me. And now I'm in those spaces and there are people that look like me and more people like me feel comfortable being here. So, yeah, it's been really rewarding to be a part of that. And also, I we just hosted our 3rd annual Day of the Dead Festival in 2025, and to go from the first year we had maybe 500 attendees, second year we had 1,000, this last one we had over 3,000 people attend that festival, and it was amazing, like, it was so cool just to see how many people from different backgrounds congregated for it. I think it was great to see all of our Latino families and people who are of Hispanic descent, but we also saw a lot of Caucasian people. We saw a lot of people just from different backgrounds, and to me, that was the most beautiful part is knowing that we're not all just here to congregate. We're also learning and being educated on something that is very near and dear to my heart.
yeah, no, and just seeing like a bunch more people, appreciate our culture too. Like Day of the
Exactly.
Dead too. Like I
Yeah,
love
'cause
that.
a big part of it that I've learned is, like, people don't always mean to be rude or disrespectful.
Yeah.
They just don't understand, and I think that that's been a big part of it is to recognize that I can still be offended sometimes and I can still get, emotional over certain things because at the end of the day, I think especially right now in the climate that we're in, it's hard to see so much hate on the internet, but when you're actually speaking to someone face to face, they're not really filled with hate. More than anything, they're filled with confusion and they're uneducated, on the specific topic. They're just, they don't know yet why it is that you are so offended or why it is that you are so moved by what's happening around you. And so I think a big part of it has been like slowing down and having conversations with people and, seeing them as people first. I think that that has been really healing to me. And also, I think has been a big part of why this community keeps growing and growing.
No, and I love that. And I have our final question that's the favorite question of our founder, Angelica Casares, is do you consider yourself a leader? Why or why not?
Yeah, I think for a long time it was hard for me to. I think that although I'm a social butterfly and I love meeting people, that's like one of my favorite hobbies is meeting new people. I was nervous to consider myself a leader because I was like, well, what qualifications do I have? And really, I think what it comes down to is not necessarily influencing people, but being able to put yourself in a position that others wouldn't. I think that a lot of us are looking towards someone or looking at who do we follow or who can we trust in these spaces. And I think a big part of it is just being one of those people that are willing to be a pillar and to be a rock and to really hold down communities and hold down these environments. And yeah, I think that that's where I've leaned into and I've proudly started to consider myself a leader. within my community for sure.
And it's so hard for us sometimes to recognize that we are leaders. And I
Yeah.
love that you're like, hey, I've been doing stuff. So
Yeah, I think sometimes I need it to be officially, like, put on me, and luckily,
yeah.
again, with working with Downtown Chico, I did get to the point where I had been there long enough where they sent me to a leadership conference, and for me, I was like, "Oh, I guess I am. I guess I can be a leader, or I can consider myself a leader."
Oh, this is just to squeeze it in, but is there anything exciting coming up for Mercado Productions that you want to tell our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I have events all year round. I guess like what I'm most excited for right now is I am about to go into my second market at Chico State. That has been so amazing, just like not only to be able to graduate from Chico State, but now to be able to give back to that community and to be able to connect with students who might be in the same place that I was one day. Yeah, that's what I'm most excited for in April.
Oh, that's amazing. And where can our listeners find you?
Social media for the most part, I love social media. So, my main page is by Lucia Mercado on Instagram, and then through that, you can find my other accounts. They're linked in my bio, and I should also have my link tree up. So again, by Lucia Mercado.
I love that. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I really appreciate it. I know our listeners are going to really enjoy this conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate it too.
Today, Lucia reminded us that you don't have to wait until you have everything figured out to start. She moved to a new town alone and built something beautiful by being willing to be vulnerable and step out first. She also reminded us that claiming your space, especially in rooms where you've been overlooked, isn't just about you. It's about the people coming after you who need to see what's possible. You can find Lucia and her markets, Lunar Market and Divine Sundays Festival, on Instagram. Thank you for listening. If this episode resonated with you, share with another amiga who's building something in a place where she feels alone. I'm Andrea Diaz, and this is the Latina Leadership Podcast. Nos vemos. Bye.